Hey guys, what's up? This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos, and today I want to talk to you guys about Plato and his notion of the Logos. Now, this is the third video in our new video series in which we're trying to trace the development of Logos theology within Western civilization, beginning with the pre-Socratic period. So in our first video, we discussed the weeping philosopher Heraclitus and how he understood the Logos as the organizing principle of reality, of the universe. And therefore, it was closely associated with words, language, and reason, thereby giving creation a sort of rationalistic order. Now, this is important because his other significant idea was pantheire, Greek for all flows. Everything is changing, everything is flowing, everything is in flux. This is highlighted by his famous quote, "No man steps in the same river twice." Though despite cities, nations, time, reality, history is always changing, it is the Logos that unifies everything. It is the Logos that is the unifying principle of reality, of the universe. So another famous quote of his is, "The pathway up and the pathway down are one and the same. Everything is in accordance with the Logos." Now, this is very different from our second video, which was on the Sophists, another pre-Socratic philosophical tradition, essentially a tradition of educators for hire. We discussed Protagoras and Gorgias and how they understood a sort of relativistic, questionable relationship to objective reality and truth. So focusing on Gorgias was most of the video, in which we see language not for the purpose of articulating truth or wisdom, but for persuasion, for manipulation, for entertainment. And this is the purpose of speech and logos, because for Gorgias, in his famous work on not being, he questions anything existing at all, and then says, if anything does exist, our conceptions of them, there is a gulf between what we think are our ideas and reality. And therefore, he says there's a same gulf between what we say, what we can articulate, and what we can think. And he believed that no person could have the same thought. Therefore, this idea of conveying truth or wisdom to somebody else is impossible, because what you're thinking, nobody else can think, and therefore it can't be expressed through words. Therefore, with language, with logos, with speech, the only thing you can do with it is be an incredible wordsmith, which they were. They were very sophisticated. The Sophists were with their language. However, it was all relativism. They didn't believe in objective truth, and that's why it was instrumental in manipulating, persuading, and entertaining people, as opposed to uncovering, investigating, or discovering truth. Now, this is going to be very different from what we discussed today with Plato, and we're going to see a little bit of Plato accommodating mostly a lot of Heraclitus' ideas. Heraclitus had a tremendous influence on Plato. So anyways, let's just get into it. Plato, born somewhere between 428 and 423, we're not exactly sure. We know that he died somewhere in the range of 348 and 347. We don't know much about his early life. Like Heraclitus, we do know that he was born to an aristocratic family. We do know that his father did everything he could to contribute to Plato's education. We believe he was born in Athens, and we know that he was educated most likely in grammar, in music, and gymnastics. Now, one of the things that I uncovered that I wasn't aware of was that Plato was an athlete. He was actually a wrestler. And from some scholars, they actually believe he participated in the Isthmian Games. Now, the Isthmian Games are games that were held in between the Olympic Games, because like today, I believe, the Olympic Games were held every 4 years, and in between they had the Isthmian Games, in which they believe Plato participated as a wrestler. So that was pretty cool. Plato is the student of Socrates and is famous for writing, or supposedly writing, a lot of dialogue Socrates had with other Greek philosophers, and famously Plato was the teacher of Aristotle. Plato developed the Platonist school of thought, obviously. He was also the founder of the academy, which was very important and contributed to what would later emerge within the Christian tradition as the university structure, which we typically associate with Catholicism, the monastic tradition. However, we can see this idea already present in Plato and his construction of the academy. He was the innovator of the written dialogue and the dialectic form of philosophy. Now, what I think is most astounding about Plato is that every single one of his works we believe to have survived from the day they were written. So for 2,400 years, it's believed that we have all of Plato's works. Now that is just incredible. That means when you're reading Plato, you are reading something that's been available from the very first day that he wrote, that he published it or whatever, that it became public, that history, the Western civilization, has always been reading Plato. And that's why I wrote down this quote by Alfred North Whitehead, analytical philosopher famous for process theory, process philosophy, that the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes back to Plato, obviously. And some of the other things that he's famous for is Platonic love, Platonic solids, geometric solids, Platonic realism, and then the things that we're going to be discussing or focusing the rest of this video on is Platonic idealism, Platonic forms. So, the theory of forms and ideas. Now, Socrates, according to these dialogues, also postulated this form, but I'm just going to be focusing on Plato. The theory of forms is actually first introduced in Phaedo, but the problem, at least from my research, is that there is a lot of contention on what the forms are. I mean, I plan on giving you a general outline, but there is still a lot of scholastic debate because Plato never really explicated exactly what and how these things worked and how he understood it. Generally, we understand it as the physical world is not as real or timeless as the realm of ideas and forms, and that everything in the physical world is an emanation from the timeless realm of ideas and forms. There's an essence back there. So, like the color red, okay? So you can have a red shirt, you can look at a red stop sign, you can look at red lipstick. What is it that all those things have in common? Plato would say, well, it's the essence of the color red that is non-physical. It's a transcendental. It's in the realm of ideas and forms. And this is true for everything. This is true for a chair. I mean, where does the chair exist? See, we could destroy all the chairs in the world, but because we still have the idea, and the idea connecting back to the transcendent realm of ideals, we can still make a chair. Ideas are non-physical essence of all things. One of the things I wrote down is our world is modeled after the forms. Therefore, humans are to imitate the ideal. Be moral, imitate the good. Now, how does this relate to the Logos? Well, the Logos is, like for Plato, this realm of ideas are actually in the Logos. And the Logos is a sort of demiurgic creation by God, even though when I say that, or the gods, because what Plato understands as God, that's another debated topic. I mean, at times he refers to gods, maybe it's polytheistic. He uses the singular, ho theos, in regards to God, though he's not understanding a monotheistic God like we would in the Christian tradition or anything of that sort. And sometimes he associates the good as God, which makes sense, but there's just a lot of convolution and ambiguity with his understanding of what exactly God is. However, we see that the Logos, and this is going to be the addition to this concept of Logos. So we already have Heraclitus, and we have the organizing principle. We have reason, we have language. And so for Plato, you have the unspoken Logos, and you have the spoken Logos. So for Plato, you see how he moves from the sophist understanding, because the sophists have nothing transcendental. The Logos is just speech. Plato says, okay, there's the spoken logos. But for him, like I mentioned, language is for the articulation of truth and wisdom. And so logos, speech, is reason. And the way we use it, we should always be using language to make clearer, move in the more ideal direction. And that language, that's the point of language, is for clarity, for getting towards what exactly meaning and truth is, as opposed to a performance, the eliciting of emotions, some type of magical power understanding, anything like that. That language is closely tied to reason. Now, what he is contributing that's going to be taken up by, the Neoplatonists, but then also by Christianity, is how the spoken logos is working with the transcendent logos. And the idea is there's this divine mind, right? And so through our nous, which only Orthodox Christianity still has a concept of nous, this is one of the reasons why I think Orthodox Christianity, I don't know. It's just, I'm more fond of it. I think it's got a little bit of a step ahead of the Western traditions, although the point of my channel, the point of my talks are never to cause conflict between Protestant Catholicism, Orthodoxy, or evangelicism, or anything like that. I do want to create a sort of mere Christianity. However, this concept that Plato's talking about the nous being this aspect in which we can partake in rational activity and logical activity. We can learn and interact with the forms, but we also have access to the divine mind, the divine logos, for him, the demiurge. This is exactly how Christianity is going to build upon this idea, because now you can see how Christianity is going to go, because the logos incarnates in Jesus Christ, that now we have a similar understanding through love, through truth, through reason, through logic, through language, through words. We can participate in the uncreated energies of the logos, the logoi. Well, you can already see this idea being developed in Plato. And this is where we're seeing a major contribution to what will be Christian theology. And one of the things that I feel like I'm noticing by doing this video series is how it almost seems like without the development of logos theology within the Greek tradition, because we're talking about 300 years here, 350, almost 400 years before Christ, this development of logos is so important, because it's almost like, the Hebrew prophetic tradition mixed with the Greek tradition. Without this idea, we couldn't understand the profundity of what occurred. So the more I study this stuff, the more interesting it really becomes for me. So anyways, like I said, the logos is speech. And Plato, one of the things that I thought is really interesting is he is very critical of the written word. Now, he believes, here I actually have a quote, he says, "Every serious man in dealing with really serious subjects carefully avoids writing." And for him, the reason being is because once you write something, you can't defend it. Somebody can read it, they can have a different idea, they can try to critique your idea, and you can't do anything about it. Therefore, given the nature of Greek philosophy, he believed that the spoken word had that it had a superior power over the written word, and that the spoken word, you can combat your ideas and do all this stuff. But one of the things that I found interesting on a tangent research project, I was looking into logocentrism, which is a debate beginning in the 19th century, the 1800s in Europe. Logocentrism begins critiquing this, leads to Derrida in the 1960s with his foul logocentrism critique. But in the 19th century, they were already questioning language of the logos and of the written word. So even in one of the things that I was reading is that even in the 19th and the 20th century, they were talking about how writing is symbolic of speech itself, and speech is symbolic of reality. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting idea. of course, you get Derrida eventually, who just says that he's essentially a sophist. I mean, he says that language is totally, there is no connection between language and reality, where the logocentrism, the logos tradition of Western civilization absolutely says it does. And this is why science emerges out of the Christian tradition, out of Western civilization, because the logos theology is saying, again, here with Plato, beginning with Heraclitus, we already see it with Heraclitus, right? Language and reason and reality itself already being rational. We see that language symbols, we can create symbols that are actually reflecting reality. You see, this is very different from the Maya illusion of Hinduism and Buddhism that reality is an illusion. No, Christianity, the logos theology, building from the Greek tradition, is saying, no, language is actually divine because it is representing reality. And this is why you can get into science, because now you're using symbolic systems, you're using measure, you're using averages to understand the created world. See, you have to have these presuppositions to even get to that understanding. So that I think is really, really interesting. Part of Plato's understanding of logos is its differentiation from mythos. So you have mythos and you have logos. Now, the way he would describe it is that mythos is the non-verifiable and logos is the rational account. Now, these two they used to be considered the same thing. However, they began to be differentiated by Herodotus, Thucydides, Heraclitus, and Parmenides. Then they started to differentiate mythos from logos. And what's ironic is how at times negative Plato sounds about mythos. However, the majority of his works are a myth, to a degree. I mean, he's constructing a sort of non-verifiable account, despite the ideas being based on logical axioms and presuppositions and principles and stuff like this. He deals a lot with mythos, which is very ironic. So for Plato, reason governs the universe. This is the logos, and this is the demiurge. This is what is it is sort of created God. That is what a demiurge is. It's a created deity to a sort. And therefore, the logos is all that is good. It is the good. However, he also understood the logos to be subordinate to God or the gods or something. So it's very difficult to actually understand what exactly he means by this. However, this is just a general outline. And as I said, there's a difference between the unspoken logos and the spoken logos, because the unspoken logos is the realm of ideals, the realm of forms. And then the spoken logos is us participating in those transcendental categories and trying to express that through language, through reason, through logic. He also describes the logos as the world teacher or the legislator of humanity. And so I have a quote here from Clement of Alexandria, one of the church fathers, that I thought was good. And he says, "It is difficult to achieve God's place, which Plato called the place of ideas, a place that embraces all and the universe. To grasp with your mind, your nous, itself, the good in itself, thus achieve its aim of thinking." Meaning that through your nous, you can participate in the divine mind. The logos is the divine mind. You have your own mind, the nous, and then logos, speech, logic, these transcendental categories. And what he's saying is, like Plato's, because Clement of Alexandria was actually pretty sympathetic to some of the ideas of Plato. Clement of Alexandria, great writings on the logos. If you're not familiar with him, check him out. But he's saying it is, with your nous, you're able to participate in the divine mind, to achieve the aim of thinking like it. You see, you can get in its order, right? You're either with it or against it. And then I have a quote by Plato here saying, "Be, but dare to speak the truth, especially when it comes to the truth. that the real essence of the soul, which is colorless, shapeless, and without possibility to be achieved, it looks only to the mind leading its soul. Meaning, it is the mind, it is the logos which leads the soul. The soul is not, well, I think what he's saying, and somebody, if anybody has a different understanding of this, you can leave a comment. But I think what he's saying is that the rational component is not the soul. It is the logos, which is going to be different from Aristotle, if you're familiar with holomorphism and stuff like this, where he thinks the soul is actually what gives form and gives reason, which is actually taken up by the Catholic Church. Catholic Church, much more Aristotelian than the Orthodox Church. I don't want to say Catholicism is Aristotelian. I don't want to say the Orthodox is Platonic, anything like that, because it's way more complex. But just the fact that they have the nous, Orthodox Church is a little bit more Platonic, whereas the Catholic Church is a little bit more Aristotelian. And so Plato says truth is the idea, and the logos is truth. And the logos is the archetypal model for the intelligible world. So one of the things that I thought about, given Plato's understanding that the logos is the archetype of the intelligible world, is that logos then has to be working within the mythos. That mythos, they can't totally be something distinct. That the mythos almost has to be subordinate to the logos. And that's, for me, why archetypes are important. Why we find patterns across religions and all this stuff is because that is the logo, that is the pattern, that is God's order. And that what the meaning systems behind these archetypes, that is the logos. That's what's important, and that's what's being observed there. And that's why, for me, the Christian tradition is so wonderful, because that's what we're worshiping. We're worshiping the logos, and we're worshiping the moral message that came with the incarnation in Jesus Christ. So that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope I made it clear. I hope I did a good job in expressing what exactly Plato understood the logos to be. The logos is where his idea of the transcendental ideas and forms exist. They exist within the timeless aspect of the logos, which is the non-spoken logos, which then through our nous we can participate and construct these spoken logos. So that's really all I have. Please leave a comment. Please share this video. Please like, and let me know what you guys think. I always appreciate your comments, and I always try to comment back. Thank you guys for all the love and support. I greatly appreciate it. Also, if you guys are on other platforms, for example, I'm trying to start growing on minds.com. I'm sure you guys see it in the video credits that roll after I get done here. I'm trying to grow on minds.com, Gab, and Instagram. If you guys are on any of those platforms, find me at DP Harry. DPHARRY. That's my handle for all three of those platforms. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for the support. I hope this video was insightful. I hope it was fairly engrossing, entertaining, if you will. But I hope it was accurate more than anything. So thank you guys for all the support. I appreciate it. I seriously do. Thank you. I love you guys. And as always, until the next time, God bless.